This is Natalia speaking, and we're very pleased to have you on board with us for the webinar on data strategy. I just wanted to let you know that in case if you have any questions or issues, you can use the chat section or the question section. So let's start, and I'm giving the floor to Carolina to make an introduction.
Thank you very much. My name is Carolina Mzik, and I work in UNDP in the Istanbul International Center for Private Sector in Development. And I'm also a UNDP Global Team Leader for the SDG Philanthropy Platform. We are very pleased to have you here today with us on the workshop about the data strategy for philanthropy and building the capacity to implement it. We have, and I'll introduce our three distinguished speakers today: Lauren Bradford, Director for Global Partnerships from the Foundation Center; Arif Ekram, Manager of Global Partnerships, also at the Foundation Center; and we would like to welcome Catherine Wenda, who is the Program Officer in the East African Association of Grantmakers in Kenya. And today, the webinar will talk about what are the different strategies for data capacity and data capacity among philanthropies for implementing sustainable development goals. This webinar is part of our partnership efforts between UNDP, the Foundation Center, and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. The three partners are working together on an initiative called the SDG Philanthropy Platform, which encourages and facilitates stronger partnerships between the governments, the UN, and philanthropy in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of us in the crowd today, obviously we see your face, we see your names, are part of these efforts, but we also see very many colleagues from UNDP who we don't know from other countries. So we would like to also use this opportunity to show how the SDG Philanthropy Platform works at the country level and engages local philanthropy and global philanthropy in the SDG implementation. Until now, we have launched the platform in 8 countries, 3 countries in Africa, which is Kenya, Ghana, and Zambia, 2 countries in Asia, which is India and Indonesia, and we also have it in Colombia, in South America, and in the United States, the only OECD country in the world where the platform has been launched. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who will start the presentation. And after Lauren finishes the presentation, we will have an opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion. And please ask your questions. First, we will actually try to do it audio. So we will ask you to give you the space, and you can ask the questions through the microphone. But sometimes the internet may not work very well, and then we will ask you please to write down the questions in the category questions. Otherwise, please use the chat to ask any sort of questions regarding the protocol or technology in this category called chat. So thank you. And finally, very important, today's webinar is recorded, and it will be available on our website, sdgfunders.org. Whomever has not seen the website yet, please go ahead and look through it. It's very interesting, and it shows, walks the talks and shows how the project is implemented. Lauren, I think you're going to tell us more about the website as well. So, Lauren, please, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina and Natalia. With me, I have Arif here, and Catherine is hopefully joining us. However, she's having bad Wi-Fi connections today in Kenya, so she might drop in and out. So we'll see how we go there. So, as Carolina has mentioned, Foundation Center is a part of the SDG Philanthropy Platform as an implementing partner. And some of you may know Foundation Center and others not. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what we do as an organization. So our Foundation Center is the leading source of information about philanthropy worldwide. We have one of the biggest databases well, the biggest database in the world on philanthropic giving, largely US grant making and more global grant making, which helps organizations around the world understand who's funding what and where and what the strategies are that those organizations are taking. Through data analysis and knowledge sharing and training, we're able to connect people who want to change the world to the resources they need to succeed. And that includes both foundations in the typical institutional sense and non-profits, and the mix of the two, which is often the case of international philanthropy, where a foundation looks a little more like a hybrid of a foundation and an NGO. We also are a technology organization. We develop data tools, we undertake research, provide education and training programs that are designed to advance knowledge of philanthropy at every level. And in line with our global strategy, we work in partnership to strengthen the international philanthropic sector by connecting, representing, and highlighting the role of philanthropy in the global development ecosystem. And overall, we really work to support foundations and philanthropic associations around the world to professionalize, to support their members, to improve their grant making, and therefore have better development outcomes. So why is philanthropy data so important? I mean, I think probably most people on the call understand why data is so important given our role as working in development. But just very briefly, as we know, we can't measure if we've achieved the SDGs without data or the eradication of poverty. And philanthropy data is a piece of that. We need philanthropic data to track financial flows, to understand who's funding what, where, and what the gaps are, where the overlaps are, and to measure progress of our work. We need data to help stakeholders make strategic partnering and funding decisions, and to ensure coordinated partnerships for more effective development outcomes. And largely, we need philanthropic data to highlight the sector's contribution to the development ecosystem, both in terms of grant making and human capital. Because philanthropy is a sector that is often not that well represented in the changing development paradigm. And so philanthropy needs to be more clearly represented because it is putting in large resources in terms of time and effort and funds, and we can better understand what's happening in development in a country if we have that information, and therefore other actors can work to not replicate each other. So the data strategy and capacity building program, why is it important? I guess we all assume that data exists and therefore we can collect and use data, but that is not really the case. In my day-to-day, work life, the biggest question is always, where's the data on this? I want to answer this question. And we know that we need data, and we know that philanthropy data is something we all want, particularly because philanthropy is such a big donor and implementer in terms of achieving the SDGs. But philanthropy data isn't actually that accessible or available right now. In the US, the data is available because there is an actual tax structure mechanism that requires the reporting of grant making through 990 tax forms. But that is not really the case in the rest of the world. There are some processes in the UK and Australia and Canada, but largely the way that the US works is the anomaly, not the rule. So if there is no specific mechanism in place for other countries to collect this data, then it doesn't necessarily exist unless organizations have taken it upon themselves, or at least to share the data that they've collected. So in order for the data to be collected, processed, analyzed, and eventually shared, all while taking into account individual country context around the world, because we know that philanthropy exists very differently in different countries around the world, the data has to exist in the first place. And as I've just said, really, unfortunately, in many places, it does not exist. And if it does exist, it's often not being shared but being used for internal purposes. So we can't understand that larger global philanthropy picture. So for the data to exist, a strategy for creating the data has to be developed, and a strategy for implementation has to be developed. And once there's a strategy, the strategy can't be implemented without the skills to do so. So this is the gap that we've seen in the philanthropy sector globally, and this is the reason that we've developed the Philanthropy Data Strategy and Capacity Building Program to implement in country with partner organizations. And the partner organization component is key, because we don't believe that this work is just a drop-in, drop-out piece, but it has to be undertaken over the long term to build the local capacity of local organizations, both foundations and associations of foundations, to ensure the long-term sustainability. So the Data Strategy and Capacity Building Program has been implemented, in this case, with the SDG Philanthropy Platform in Kenya, and later this year will be in Ghana as well. We've also been doing this work in some other countries in East Africa, including Tanzania and Uganda, and we've commenced the work in the MENA region as well, and we'll also be starting it in Romania later this year. So for the purposes of this conversation, we're just going to focus on Kenya, because Kenya has actually come a long way over a number of years, both prior to the work that we've commenced doing and the work that we are now undertaking with the SDG Philanthropy Platform and other partners. So in Kenya, there had been some preliminary work done on the philanthropy sector over the last few years by the East African Association of Grant Makers and then the Kenya Philanthropy Forum. And that work identified a desire and a need to focus on the principles of data collection and building the capacity for collecting data in Kenya. And so it's important to note that this work isn't starting from scratch, and that there was a desire already to do it. In Kenya, we've been working with, and sorry for the acronyms here for the partners, but the SDG Philanthropy Platform and UNDP, obviously, the East African Association of Grant Makers, the Kenya Community Development Foundation, and the Office of the Deputy President. We've held 3 workshops to date, a scoping workshop, an implementation workshop, and a data portal prototype workshop, which I'm going to talk about in some more detail shortly. And we've had over 100 participants across the 3 meetings to date, including philanthropy and government and some NGOs. And we've generally had the same participants across different meetings, and we've had some new participants across each of the meetings as well, which has been great for consistency, and it's also been great to learn from different organizations as they've been involved. And to help shape the agendas for each of these workshops, as we've undertaken our background research with the East African Association of Grant Makers and the SDG Philanthropy Platform, we have circulated surveys to possible participants prior to the workshops to get a better idea of how they are already working with data and how they'd like to work with data. So now I'm going to focus a little bit on the process of what we've undertaken to date, so that you can see if this is something that resonates with you or that's interesting in your own country. So in the first workshop, the scoping workshop, the purpose was to really collectively, with Foundation Centre facilitating the work in partner with the organisations I just mentioned, understand what the challenges and the needs were in Kenya, and to really identify those so we could start to work around those. We also looked at principles for collaborative data and knowledge management, because it's very hard to start taking a strategic approach to data if there are not an agreed set of principles by those who are working with data. We also presented some different technologies and existing websites, including SDG funders for collecting and sharing data and knowledge. And we talked about different global and local knowledge initiatives, such as the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and some work that's being undertaken by UNDP, for example, in relation to that work. And then also the connection with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data at the local level in Kenya, where the government and the Deputy President's Office is very involved, to highlight how philanthropy and philanthropic data fits into a broader ecosystem at a global level and a local level. And then we really focused the second half of the scoping meeting on setting local data and knowledge goals based on these challenges and needs. Then following this, several months later, we held the second workshop, which was to commence implementation, really focusing on the goals that had been identified in the scoping meeting and how to start to work around some of these challenges and needs. So there is an organization called the Worldwide Initiative for Grantmaker Support, which some of you may know of, which is a global association of philanthropic associations around the world. And Foundation Center and Wings over a number of years have developed a global philanthropy data charter to help guide organizations in working with data and knowledge. And we're actually working to update that at the moment and re-release it in the second half of this year. And so that's actually a tool that we could share at the end of this webinar. And we also worked in this meeting on walking participants through a data roadmap. And the data roadmap is to show what it takes to actually collect, process, and analyze data. And then we also undertook group work to move the needle forward on the goals that were identified in the scoping meeting. And so those goals included creating a value proposition for data, because we found that a large problem in Kenya was that many organizations, either in the room or not even in the room, but other stakeholders in the development ecosystem and the government may not have necessarily understood the value for philanthropic data, or they understood it, but there were still concerns around transparency, for example. So we worked on creating a value proposition. Another goal was capacity building and inclusivity. So the participants identified the skills that they thought that they needed to have developed to be able to collect and process and analyze data, and what type of stakeholders should be involved in that. Another goal identified was creating a culture of collaboration and building trust in data processes. And finally, we identified a goal on quality of product and developing a data system. So essentially having a local Kenya data portal. So this is the roadmap, which is a tool that we've developed and that we're hoping to turn into a curriculum. And the slides will be shared after the webinar so you can look at this more closely. But it shows how much work actually can go into collecting, processing, and analyzing data. And this is a tool that we walked through in this workshop, to give people an idea of the types of skills they need to have to undertake this work and the level of work, and therefore the resources that it requires to work with data and how that may be resolved. And then in Kenya, as I mentioned, the participants worked on developing a data value proposition, and here you can see that they came up with a philanthropy data in one portal for one Kenya. And this was really exciting to participants because it started to solidify an outcome of where the work was headed. And so the focus of this was that a portal should be developed. It should be a one-stop shop for philanthropic data to enhance the collective contribution towards national development aspirations. It should help to achieve organizational goals faster by using less resources, and data can help to avoid duplication by forging smarter partnerships and to be part of effective grant making. And then the most recent workshop that we ran in Kenya, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, maybe just a month ago, was really exciting. So in 2016, we put in a lot of the groundwork together with very engaged participants leading the way, shaping the work, providing the input, and Foundation Center essentially facilitating and synthesizing. And we got to the place of actually starting to develop a data portal prototype. So the idea now is for Foundation Center to develop a prototype of which can then be built in country by a local organization or further by Foundation Center or something else, which I'll elaborate on shortly. But in this third workshop, what we focused on was different data buckets, essentially. So what types of data is needed to create a portal for Kenyan philanthropy? And so you can see here we identified very simplistically, and obviously this can be expanded on and become a much greater data set, but for the purposes of this process, we decided it was most effective to simplify into some clear examples of different types of data to use here. And this is up to the participants to shape or change further, but this was generally the agreed structure. And the information that we talked about or agreed to include over time, probably not all initially, was information on Kenyan foundations, whether they be operating foundations and are implementing their own programs, or whether they be grant-making foundations who are providing funds to recipient organizations who are then subsequently implementing the programs. Information on beneficiary populations, geo-area locations, both served and the location of the recipients. Government statistics to provide context to this data, and different resources in terms of reports, for example, or indicators, and monitoring and evaluation frameworks. And so in order, though, for foundations in Kenya to be able to develop, feed into a data portal, they had to agree on what type of data they'd be willing to share, because obviously the portal can't be developed if the data is not shared. And so some of the different types of data that were either agreed to be shared or discussed to be shared that had some sensitivities included annual reports, program descriptions with geographical locations, best practices in case studies, efficiencies learned, outcome and impact reports, lessons learned, criteria for selecting beneficiaries, possibly grantees by demographics and locations, survey outcomes and research reports, regulation standards and ethics, contact information, etc. Beneficiaries were also identified, and in some cases there was a mixed feeling around sensitivity on beneficiaries, so that's a conversation we'll continue to have in Kenya. And there was also a conversation around financial transactions and whether grant information would be okay to display in a prototype data portal, or if just asset information of foundations would be okay to share. And in this portal prototype, it was agreed that this information would only be used in Kenya. It would be password protected, so it could only be accessed by those who are also willing to share information in the portal. And Foundation Center will not do anything else with this information as it's shared with us to build this prototype, except for to put it into this prototype. So in terms of next steps, the participants are going to share data with the East African Association of Grant Makers and Kenya Philanthropy Forum, or KCDF. That data will be shared with Foundation Centre, and we will develop a prototype portal for members only. Then following this, when this is presented in the coming months, we'll have to decide on the next steps of where the complete version is stored, built, and managed, etc. And that may mean that a portal is then built locally by a local organization. It may mean that Foundation Centre or another organization builds it, and then this will also largely depend on the ongoing management, sustainability, and financing of such a portal. So this is the conversation that will follow in the 4th workshop. And then based on this is when the skill development and capacity building will start to come into play as those skills are developed that are needed to actually collect and process the data to feed into the system. And then Foundation Centre, the East African Association of Grant Makers, Kenya Philanthropy Forum, and the SDG Philanthropy Platform will continue to work to plug philanthropy into the broader data and development ecosystems. And we will continue to build the capacity of EAG themselves and the Kenya Philanthropy Forum so that they can build these skills up to continue to build the skills of their own members and provide value to their members. And then we will continue to develop this community of practice together. So that's the process to date. Now, I'm not sure if Catherine Wendler from East African Association of Grant Makers is still online or not. Catherine, are you there, or have you been cut off? I think she's being cut off. No? Catherine, are you there?
Lauren, we cannot see, so maybe because the internet connection may not be the best, but Lauren, we have Arif Neki, the SDG Philanthropy Platform coordinator in Kenya, and he raised his hand. He wanted to make a comment. So
okay, great.
Great. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Carolina. This is Arif Neki, coordinator of the SDG Philanthropy Platform in Kenya, and delighted to join you on this webinar. I'd just like to echo, all the good work that has happened that Lauren has described in the Kenyan context, and maybe just emphasize that in the context we've seen that one of the aspects around data has been the importance of sort of building trust, because there's been a perennial suspicion generally between civil society and government over the years, which goes up and down and comes to a head prior to elections. We have elections in August, and typically prior to elections you do find a number of NGOs are struck off. And since foundations and trusts oftentimes register as NGOs, you tend to find that foundations and trusts are often a little reluctant to share information more broadly for fear of sort of having that information used against them in future. So I think a bit of that trust building exercise has also happened over the 3 workshops that Foundation Center has helped with EAG and KCDF and the Philanthropy Forum and partners, and the earlier first workshop we had held prior to that. But I think the second opportunity here is to say that the Kenya Bureau of Statistics, which generally records statistics of contributions to GDP, has never in 50 years of Kenya's independence, in a sense, captured the contribution of philanthropy to GDP. And so this is a great opportunity for us as it unfolds and eventually as data is made more freely available, to actually capture this into national statistics. Kenya has already rebased its economy and is seen as a kind of a lower middle income country status, and this can only augment that status moving forward. But the second aspect, I think, is around ensuring that there is open data available over time, So there is a parallel ministry, the Ministry of Information, Communications and Technology, who are looking at an open data portal as well to try and make public-private data more accessible. And this is also encouraged by the Global Initiative on Sustainable Data, of which Kenya is an important player. And in fact, Kenya will be hosting the Global Summit in 2 months' time in Nairobi. So I think for us, there's great opportunity because there's a lot more awareness about how important data is and how Africa needs to be making development and political decisions based on evidence rather than business as usual in the past. The implications for that, I think, with Lauren touched on, are very important because the implications are around capacity. And when you look at the philanthropy sector, the Kenya Philanthropy Forum has about 80 foundations and trusts and growing. But this is a mixed fruit basket. You have large, strong corporate foundations, you have family foundations, you have community foundations, etc. And so some of these foundations tend to have fairly weak capacity. And so I think this whole initiative is extremely important in terms of bringing at least a minimal level of capacity to ensure that there is some level of consistency in the type and quality of data that's being collected. And thirdly, I'd just like to say that there's an opportunity here to link this data to the indicators that Kenya has selected from the global indicators under the SDG framework. Kenya has for now selected 120 indicators that it feels comfortable to commence with. And so the SDG impacts that are being measured and tracked that will be part of the Kenya report back to the United Nations General Assembly should hopefully in time be able to also capture the impacts that philanthropy is doing, either directly or through its local partners and CSOs. So I think these are exciting times, and we're delighted that the data is becoming a fairly important vector in development discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif. They're really good points, and it's important to note to everyone on the call that, yes, we have been undertaking this work through the SDG lens and using the targets and indicators as a real driver for collecting data. And Catherine is online. Carolina, are you able to give Catherine access so that she can also speak?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Can you all hear me?
We can. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, and just wanted to share the experience that TAG has had, of course, working in partnership with the Foundation Center and Kenyan partners on the data program. And one of the most valuable experiences for us has been the fact that despite the fact that we have attempted several times to try and quantify the value of philanthropy, especially on contributing to national development, there were some issues in terms of facilitative techniques, and the Foundation Center has came in to leverage and support the East Africa Association of Grant Makers in mobilizing foundations and trusts to collectively come together to develop a strategy on collecting and managing data on this. And more importantly, because of this, we've been able to consolidate partnership and a lot of goodwill, especially from the government with the support of UNDP Kenya. And this has drawn a lot of attention to the value of philanthropy data in specific. And because of this, there have been very many conversations between the philanthropy sector and the government has been keen to find ways to support the philanthropy sector to profile philanthropy as a data ecosystem. And through the support and partnership with the Foundation Center, UNDP Kenya, and the different actors, we've been able to link the data processes in Kenya to other global initiatives and processes, including the Global Data Charter, to see how the principles within the Global Data Charter interlink with the principles that have been proposed by foundations and trusts in the specific Kenyan context. We've been also able to link with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development to ensure that whatever we're doing is aligned to the proposals that are being made beyond Kenya as a country. And also, as Arif has mentioned, the ability for us to take a seat in the table when it comes to discussing the national data plans and ensuring that philanthropy is profiled as a key data source for quantifying national development. And of most important has been that the platform in itself, despite coming together to mobilize support for a collective data system, the ability that the platform has had in providing a networking opportunities for organizations. And it's at this point that foundations and trusts have been able to gauge the data capacities, have been able to identify some of the data capacity needs, and this process has also been keen on ensuring that it provides support for organizations to deal with these challenges. And a lesson learned, especially for the Kenyan context, is the diversity and the differences when it comes to data processes in Kenya and in other countries. And for this, the partnership has been cognizant and has really acknowledged the specific contextual issues in the way it planned its partnerships in this process, ensuring that decision making is inclusive, and also ensuring that it takes into consideration the different forms of philanthropy and how they do contribute to national issues and how national development. And this has helped us define and design processes that ensure that all those unique aspects of philanthropy within the Kenyan context are captured. And just to mention, in addition to the presentation that was made by Lauren and Arif too, is that we are not working in solitude. We work through a steering committee of foundations and trusts that also support in this process. Thank you.
Great, thanks Catherine, and thanks Arif. And that was Arif Neki from UNDP, just for you all on the call, not Arif Ekram from Foundation Center, which is also always a confusing point in our partnership, but both great Arifs, and thank you Catherine. So the real aim of this work has to be inclusive and contextually relevant in country and take very much a bottom-up partnership approach. So just quickly, to really read the details of what we've been doing to date, there are 2 reports so far as that are outcomes from the 2 meetings in 2016, and we're currently working on a report for the recently held meeting. These reports on the Kenya Data Strategy and Capacity Building Program can be found on sdgfunders.org, which is the SDG Philanthropy Platform website, and you can find a range of tools there and data that's crosswalked to the SDGs. So now I'm going to hand over to Arif Ekram, who's just going to talk about a couple of specific tools on sdgfunders.org, and we'll talk about a couple more Foundation Center tools that you might find relevant, and then we'll try and save a large amount of time for question and answer.
Thank you, Lauren, and sorry to all of you by confusing being the second Arif here. Honestly, it's none of our fault. We should ask our parents. Anyway, so SDG Funders, as you have heard, is the website of SDG Philanthropy Platform, and as Carolina mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, that SDG Philanthropy Platform is right now present in 8 pilot countries. And for most of them, we have these custom-made maps. So to be specific, we have these custom-made maps for 5 pilot countries. And you can see Kenya, Zambia, Ghana, and Indonesia here. I have nothing against Colombia, it's just a space issue, so I couldn't include their map here. But what it essentially shows is the top grants as just a demonstration that the map is, the SDG Funders dashboard basically gives you the aggregates, but we wanted to show how the real data may look like. So as you can see, probably if the display quality you're getting is good enough, that it has maps and bubbles, and all those bubbles has some number inside it, and that actually shows that in which part of certain countries, certain city, that a recipient is located. So a fund, let's say, going to Kenya from Canada, and the recipient is located, let's say, in Nairobi in Kenya, this map will capture that grant. And it's just the top grants, so like first 50 or first 100, but eventually the plan is to make it all accessible and publicly available. And the other plan is to capture the local data that we are trying to get and build that capacity through our capacity building work. And if everyone agrees, and if there is trust, that, which is very important, and Arif Neki mentioned about that, and also Catherine talked about that, in the future, if it becomes satisfactory and everyone is comfortable sharing their data and making it public, it can come on a map like this and it can be publicly open. But till now, till that happens, what we are trying to do, we are trying to build all those prototypes that Lauren talked about, and that all can be password protected, or they can build it themselves, or we can just give them examples. It's up to them. So this is just an example of what all that can, all that data can do. Just one example. But specifically talking about this map, it shows how all the grants that are relevant to achieving the SDGs can be mapped on a geo-coded platform. The next one is another interesting tool, and we have been receiving many compliments for this work, and many people have told us they have been finding this more and more helpful in their day-to-day work. So we call this SDG Indicator Wizard. The idea is to standardize everyone's understanding of SDG. So basically, let's say the way this tool works is you type in your goals or mission, the mission of your organization or objective of your particular work. You type it in, and then you hit the show results button, and it will essentially speed out the SDGs, the targets and the indicators which are relevant to your work. So in a way, it tells everyone, okay, even if you are not deliberately doing SDG work, if SDG is not the framework that you are following deliberately, but still you have some component in your work that are relevant to the SDG framework. And also, it's our effort to standardize across the spectrum. So, like, let's say I code one thing as SDG 7, you code the same thing as SDG 8, then it creates another problem. So this is our effort to address that one too. And we're trying to make it more and more accessible. And then you see on the right-hand side of the screen, this tool is available in mobile form, so you can download it both in App Store if you're an Apple user, or if you're an Android lover, you can also find it in Google Store. So the reason is, we know in some countries the internet bandwidth is not so satisfactory as of yet. So we made this low bandwidth version so that you can download it on a phone and you can quickly turn your own mission into an SDG compatible version. So I think I'll stop there, and over to you, Lauren.
Okay, so just very quickly, I won't spend much time here because I want to allow time for question and answer, but just a couple of other tools that we have here. The two tools that Foundation Center has that Arif just mentioned around SDG funders, they're actually built originally from the database that sits behind this tool called Foundation Maps, which you should all look up. Type into Google Foundation Maps and it will come up. But essentially that has all of the grants of who's funding what where on largely US philanthropy and more international philanthropy. It has the grant details, it has the amounts of grants, etc. And it also now, not publicly facing, but on our end at least in the short term, all of these grants are also coded to the SDGs, which is really exciting. So have a play in Foundation Maps, and happy to answer any questions about that separately. And then one other tool, just to let you know, that we all have is called Issue Lab, which is essentially a qualitative database of reports and publications. There's over 22,000 resources in here. And the reports range from all types of things to UN reports, to foundation strategies and approaches, capacity building guides and whatnot. So I think you might all find some useful information in both of these tools. So with that, let's go to any questions that are out there. Natalia and Carolina, you can moderate the questions, and we will try our best to answer. And if Catherine and Arif Neki are still on the line, then they can help answer them. I'm just not sure if they're both there still or not.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was very good. Catherine and both Arifs. We don't have any questions written down, but we would want the colleagues to please raise their hands. Please raise your hand using the right banner. You see there is a little hand icon, just press it and we'll see if you would want to speak. Right now we see, scroll down. We don't really see, oh yes, Cryptocus would like to ask a question. We'll give the floor to Cryptocus. And if you could introduce yourself, please, and let us know which country you're from and which organization, that would be great. And then after that, I'm going to ask Serge Capto. Is Serge still with us? Please identify yourself, because I would like to then Serge talk a little bit about how he thinks we can link these efforts with broad UNDP work on data. Ruchi, I can see that you have a hand on, so yes, and scroll down. You'll be next. Okay, so we have Cryptus and Ruchi. Cryptus, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself. Did you give him an opportunity? You have to unmute him.
No, he is muted.
Oh, okay. Cryptus, you can now speak.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm Kritikos Shindano from the Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, which is a local network of CSOs in Zambia, basically working around national development planning processes, but also monitoring their implementation using different tools. I'm quite intrigued by the different tools, first and foremost, that are available out there under the SDG Philanthropy, and just to congratulate everyone for the good work they're doing. I just wanted to get a sense, especially from the examples of Kenya, with regards to what extent the local philanthropy, this is outside the usual suspects, this is from the domestic private sector, have been forthcoming with such initiatives. But also those big MNCs that have an attribute of development work through corporate social responsibilities, but do spend quite enormous sums of amount towards development, and to what extent have there been efforts to bring them on board, especially those that believe that this is the model which should be taken in terms of development. But clearly looking at the model that the SDG Philanthropy has come up with in terms of aligning it to the mechanisms such as the SDG is one that we always have been calling for. So that's the perspective I actually wanted to get. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe it's Lauren here. I might start from the data perspective, and also Catherine might want to add in, but Carolina might also want to add in from the way that the work is taking place in country beyond data as well. But from the data perspective, the private sector has been involved in the sense that there are many corporate foundations in Kenya. And so because we're working primarily with philanthropy and the overlap to NGOs on this work, we haven't deliberately, on the data work, engaged directly with private sector companies, but we have had some, I guess, social impact investing organizations such as Acumen and private foundations such as, for example, Equity Group Foundation involved in the different workshops. And Catherine or Carolina, do you want to add anything to that?
It's Carolina here. I don't actually have anything to add, but I just got a quick message from Serge Kapto that he needs to drop off soon, and I would like to hear his perspective, because recently, colleagues, Serge has developed guidelines for UNDP to work on data with different stakeholders, and I think it would be very important to hear from him and his perspective of how this would work, how we can work closer with philanthropy. Serge, the floor is yours, and then we'll go back to Catherine.
Thank you, Caroline. I hope everybody hears me. Thanks a lot, Lauren, for this presentation, and thanks also to the two Arifs. It's very nice to hear your voices again. And I'm sorry that I have to drop out very quickly, but I will ask a couple of questions and make a few quick points. The first question being around the portals, and I'm sort of wondering, in a way, how many open data portals does Kenya need? Because I'm aware that there's been already one developed, and I hear about a few more. So maybe there is some room for consolidation there when it comes to data dissemination of the various efforts in the Kenyan data ecosystem. It's quite comforting, in my view, to see that you're also working with Office of the Vice President, which has been the champion of the data revolution movement in Kenya. And that might, I think, be a good opportunity to strengthen the synergies across all the different players, in particular the Statistics Office and the office that is developing open data policies, as well as other stakeholders within the country. My second point is to ask a bit more about how the links between the roadmaps that will be developed through this project and the one that the Kenyan government is also developing, if I understand correctly, in the context of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which has also had some workshops in the country looking at data roadmaps. And also, I think this is, in terms of my perspectives now, I think this is a great contribution to actually make the process more participatory and more inclusive. That has been one of the main drivers behind our work on strengthening data ecosystem, and particularly looking at those collaborative opportunities between different stakeholder groups. And one of the most overlooked groups when it comes to development implementation in African countries in particular is the philanthropic community, and we could see that in the report of the Africa Data Revolution report that just came out, that was published jointly by UNDP, ECA, Web Foundation, and IDLC, and there is this work that you're doing, strengthening their capacities when it comes to data, would be an invaluable contribution to improving processes around that on the continent. But also, I think that it would help spread a little bit beyond the philanthropic community. I know that you're targeting philanthropic organizations at the moment, but I see them as sort of as having a multiplier effect because of the impact that you would have with your trainees. And there's a lot of capacity needs when it comes to data literacy on the continent in other stakeholder groups that could benefit a lot from the resources and expertise that you're developing in the philanthropic sector. I'm thinking in particular about civil society organizations, which are expected to play a stronger role when it comes to citizen-generated data and accountability processes on the SDGs, but also the media in the continent, which need to have better capacity at using data and sort of translating raw data into information that is usable by citizens and actionable by policymakers. So a bit of a question and a challenge at the same time in a way, as you roll out these programs in Kenya, in Ghana, and other African countries to see how we can strengthen those multiplier effects towards those other groups, which I think are critical. And also to get back to Caroline's point, strengthen the linkages, and I think we do. We do have that now, Caroline, because it's us, right? The strengthening the linkages with the implementation process for the SDG overall at country level. There are many of the countries where you are also countries where we are going and assisting governments on developing implementation plans for sustainable development priorities and looking at alignment between their national plans and the SDGs and what sort of mechanisms and policies they could adopt to speed up implementation and monitoring. At the moment, we do have several initiatives on the way. Caroline mentioned the guidance note on data for development that we are finalizing now, which builds a lot on some of the findings of our data ecosystem project, but also of the philanthropy project to look at how we can strengthen the value chain of data for the SDGs at national level. But we do also have processes more related to the intergovernmental mechanisms around SDG implementation and reporting. We have guidelines to assist countries in reporting at the high-level political forum that were developed jointly by the United Nations Development Group or the other agencies in the UNDP. And within that framework, I think that there are also opportunities for synergies in ensuring that reporting by philanthropic organizations or supported by philanthropic organizations contributes to the overall reporting that a government would make at the very high level in the UN in New York. We are rolling out these guidelines and integrated support to countries at national level in a number of countries. And in those countries, I think that we do have an opportunity to systematically engage with the philanthropic organizations to ensure that they participate and they make a meaningful contribution to that process. That is something I think where we can do much better than we have so far, in all honesty, between us here in UNDP and Foundation Center, which has a quite extensive network of philanthropic organizations that they're working with for this project. So I hope that we can strengthen those linkages and continue working together as we go. I think we do have some good examples, like in Colombia, where there's been an amount of synergies that has happened there that we could build on and replicate in other countries. I'll stop here. This was a bit long-winded, but I have to drop off. But I look forward to stay in touch and keeping the conversation going. Thank you.
Thanks, Serge. And thanks, Serge.
Yes, thank you. Go on, Lauren.
I was going to say thanks, Serge, for those great comments and questions, and I'll vouch for the great work that Serge is doing. And he's made some very good points, all of which we agree with, particularly around essentially plugging this work into the work that's taking place more broadly and globally. And I think now we've gotten to a point with this work where originally we were sort of connecting it, just making the connection at a higher level, and now that we're starting to get to a point where we have a real community of practice and actual data sharing taking place and a strategy that we can be much more deliberate in connecting across the sectors. I'm not sure if Serge is still there, but I'll briefly answer the couple of questions that he had anyway. One was around how many portals are needed, which is a really good point and something that we, agree that data should not be totally siloed. The approach that we're taking, though, through this work is that what we've realized is because of the need for building a culture of data sharing and building trust, it needs to be a step-by-step process. So philanthropy in Kenya now is willing to share data amongst each other, particularly through the Kenya Philanthropy Forum and the East African Association of Grant Makers as member organizations. And then as there's a level of comfort then participants hopefully will be more willing to share that data more openly, and then possibly into other portals in the way that Serge has described. So that is certainly the desired outcome and end game, if that's what is okay for philanthropy in the sector and they feel comfortable with that in Kenya. But it's a step-by-step process to get to the end point on that. And then, like I said, we've been connecting with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and the Deputy President's Office, and I think now we are at a point where the work is at the tipping point to be able to connect in more and be present on a larger scale. And we are aiming to, I'm not sure if it will happen yet, but if we can have a prototype built by the end of June, we will hope to present it at a possible regional African meeting for the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data that we're working on the Deputy President's Office with in Kenya. And then finally, Serge pointed out the multiplier effect and data literacy across the continent and across sectors. And that is obviously something that we are very willing to do and be involved in, given our learnings to date and given our work with different types of partners, including UNDP, including government, including philanthropy and CSOs. And Foundation Centre also does do a lot of work with CSOs that we have that knowledge and skill set to continue with on the continent as well. We've just originally started the work with the philanthropy sector, given that's what the SDG Philanthropy Platform focuses on, and to consolidate it initially, but it can certainly expand. And philanthropy in Kenya often is largely civil society and NGOs anyway. They're one and the same sometimes. So there's not a hard and fast distinction there. The end goal is to improve data and knowledge for more effective grant making and development outcomes. Are there any other questions, Carolina or Natalia?
Yes, there are many questions. Many people have raised their hands. Just want to say that Catherine want to add anything brief at this point, because otherwise we'll just move on to next questions.
Maybe just to add to what...
Go on, Catherine.
Yes. Sorry, just to add on to what Lauren made a comment on, we're working closely to ensure, one of our strategies is to ensure that we align the work we're doing to other processes without duplicating, but ensuring that the philanthropy sector in itself is well profiled. But we're closely working with organizations that are keen to promote data, specifically on CSR contribution, like the Aga Khan Foundation, which is a key partner and supporter of the data process in Kenya, that is keen to profile corporate giving, not specifically for foundations, but beyond foundations into CSR. We're also trying to align what we're working on with the CIFA program that is under the Deputy President's Office, that is also keen to focus on CSR contributions. And we have been in communication with organizers of the National Data Roadmap, and we've had conversations on how we can integrate the process that we're currently undertaking into the National Data Roadmap strategy.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you.
So now we have questions. Maybe let's ask questions from Barbara, who is from Zambia, and she's asking, if I can scroll up, if it's possible to replicate the SDGPP in Zambia. We have proposed this to UNDP, and I would like to hear your views. I think we have somebody from Zambia. I think Carrie and Mabin are there, so I would like to ask Carrie or Mabin, please, to take the floor to respond to Barbara's question. Carrie or Mabin? Mabin is there. Mabin, we're giving you the floor.
Hello, this is Mabin on the line.
Yes.
Hello?
Can you introduce yourself, Mabin? Yes, go on. We can hear you very well.
My name is Mabin Nsipila, and I'm the National Coordinator for the SDGPP in Zambia. Is the question coming from Barbara from the Zambia Governance Foundation?
Barbara, yes.
Yeah, actually, we've had meetings with them as SDGPP, and in fact, we have shared some of the work that we are planning to do. And in any case, one of the activities that we have is something focusing on data capacity building. It might not exactly sound the way it has been presented here, because we are basically at the stage of conceptualizing what kind of work we want to do in Zambia. So clearly, the impressive work that has been done in Kenya is something we want to do, and it's part of our work program here. Patrick earlier asked a question. In fact, we have a pending meeting with Patrick to discuss some of the ideas regarding how we move forward with the data-related activities that we've planned. So really, in a nutshell, the question that Barbara is asking is something that we plan to do. I think what we need to do is probably to explore more with the Foundation Center whether we can follow the exact path, or if there are any variants depending on some of the immediate needs that we might see. I think that is exactly what we would be doing and exploring further with our colleagues from CSPR and the Zambia Governance Foundation.
Exactly. I think it's
Can I suggest that maybe this conversation is taken offline between Barbara, Lauren, and Mabin of how this can be done in Zambia, because we have many more questions and many more hands, and I'm just afraid that we will not be able to respond to all of them, and we have to give the equipment back in 20 minutes.
Great, Carolina, we can do that. I think it's a good suggestion so that we have the opportunity to basically explore in greater depth.
So the next question is from Suruchi from India. Suruchi, do you want to take the floor, please? Suruchi, the floor is yours. But we cannot hear you. Okay, let's just give the next question is from. Okay, we have a question from Suruchi. I'm going to read it out. So I have a request. If you could highlight the measures being undertaken to augment the presence of this portal, so that potential partners may approach us directly through the portal instead of us trying to identify and map them. Lauren, over to you.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I'll try and answer it. In terms of mapping them, I mean, there's different ways of doing that locally, around collecting information from any national organizations that already exist, or the government, through Foundation Center tools, through online research. That's work that for the SDG Philanthropy Platform exactly is being undertaking in country, and which you do in India. Through the portal prototype work, the mapping will happen naturally by way of which organizations share their information through this process, of which we'll then be able to create profiles, but it won't be comprehensive of the whole sector across each country initially, because it's focusing on championing a smaller subset so we can have a targeted effort. I'm not sure if that quite answers the question.
But she also probably tried to ask whether an interested foundation can contact through the portal. And that, yes, if that's the question, yes, that's absolutely possible. And we have gotten in touch with some of them through the portals, SDGPP, especially even yesterday, a big foundation called Comic Relief, they got in touch with us. They had a few questions. They wanted to share their data. So yeah, that's also possible if that's what you were asking.
And that's by way of sdgfunders.org, the portal that already exists, not the data prototype that we're creating.
Yep.
and Arif. And hopefully this response to the question. The next, I would like to give the floor to Radhika Shah, who has also raised a question. I think it's me. It's actually Silas Carolina. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Radhika, can you speak?
Yes, this is Radhika Shah. I'm an advisor to the platform based in Silicon Valley. I have a couple of questions, comments on Kenya and other countries as this work is being done. Is there, are we looking at automated leveraging of technology for some of these things? And two resources I want to share, and then the questions related to, are we looking at things like that? Do we want to look at that? One is related to the question that Suruchi asked, that is one possibility is for organizations to identify themselves. Then as we go to bigger countries like India and such, there are so many NGOs and so many players. Is there interest or work in auto-identifying existing NGOs and foundations? One thing we looked at here at Stanford, which I'm also a co-president at the Stanford Tech Innovation Club. The top professor in search, Professor Jeff Allman, has some algorithms to auto-discover. We can enter some foundations and a learning set of the kind we're looking for, and one could auto-discover via technology, the way Google does crawling, any organizations of interest. So that's one resource I wanted to put on the table, and the question was, is there some thinking around over time doing that? Second, whether it be NGOs, foundations, any affiliated organizations where it's hard to have the data from like proactively find it from websites or talking to governments. The second question again is around leveraging technology. We have a project at Stanford called the Participatory Decision Making project, where a large number of people can participate in any decision, and it could be very useful for reporting, where you can show are they collaborating visually with a graph, and how, for example, if the Kenya Philanthropy Forum is debating a topic, can in real time visually see, and if some of them are not in the room, they can still participate, and you can see are people going towards collaboration on an issue or diverging, and it's been shown to be very powerful in leading to collaboration. The professor who designed it, Professor Ashish Goel, is a top guy in social media here. He has signed on to be an advisor to the platform in India. So if interest, we can engage these. And then the question is there thinking on leveraging this kind of technology already?
Okay, so in answer to your question, Radhika, Foundation Center has auto-coding technology, yes, and we use it in our own work, in our own products. But for this work, it's really important that the participants themselves collect and share the data, because it's about building the culture and building the trust. And so, sure, we could look for information on their websites through auto-coding technology, but that would defeat the point of the capacity building component of the work. So there's different ways that the foundations will share the data with the East African Association of Grant Makers, and that will be either through actual templates and an updated tool that we have, so there will be fields to fill out, but they will also be able to send us annual reports in addition to this, and the annual reports is an example of a resource where auto-coding technology can be used to try and lift out data more quickly. So it's really around the purpose of this work, which is largely around building capacity and understanding as well, not just collecting data for data's sake. And then to the second point, I think I'll leave that into...
Sorry, Lauren, on the first point, my question was not on them sharing the data, but identifying them in the first place. So if there are foundations or organizations we may not know of, this technology I mentioned would help automatically identify them. And then, of course, they would share and participate. But it was more about discovering them, the first part of it, not so much finding the next level data.
Okay, so for sure that can be done, but we're working for this work with the specific participants that are in the meeting, so they're involved in it from the beginning. And when we did start the work, obviously there was a mapping undertaken to try and reach out to participants. But I get your point for sure. And I think Arif just wants to add.
Yeah, so in terms of traceability or foundations identifying themselves, that technology is already there, and Foundation Center has been successfully using that for quite some time. but based on our experience, I can tell you that only happens in an advanced philanthropic, industry, if you like. So in the U.S., that's possible and that's happening. We've been able to use that in the U.S. and we've been using that in the U.S. for quite some time. But for other countries, I don't know whether that would be possible or equally effective. But my point is that technology is already available and we have been using that for quite some time.
So Radhika, for sure, in terms of you're right, answering Rushi's question from earlier of mapping who's in the country, that's certainly a way of doing it, the mapping piece, certainly.
And on the second one, any thoughts? The collaboration and the participation?
I think that's a separate conversation, probably for the platform and with Carolina, but I'm not sure if Carolina's got anything to add on that.
Yes, Lauren, I think maybe and Ruchi, let's take this conversation offline as well. And then I would like to suggest, is Isaac online, please? If you can identify yourself, because we cannot see you, but I know that you're, yes, maybe Carolina. If you can raise your hand, Isaac, or we give you the floor, if you can write the name, the question, or give us comments. Isaac is connected from Ghana, and Ghana will soon be also. Yeah, Isaac, please. Okay. So it doesn't seem like we can speak with Isaac. So maybe Lauren, we can take this conversation and the question from Isaac offline. I don't. What's that?
I said sure. That sounds good.
Okay. I think we already have asked. Yeah, we have additional questions from Suruchi, which are the following. Are media and advocacy campaigns being undertaken to make organizations aware of the platform? So I think maybe Lauren, why don't you start, or perhaps Catherine. Catherine, you probably have a lot to say about this. If you're still online, can you respond to this question?
I'm not sure if Catherine's still there, but
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm here. Yes, we've been using.
Go on.
Yes, sorry about that. We've been using various platforms, philanthropy, and even the broader CSO sector to talk about the data program at large, and also leveraging on the SDG funders' websites and our members' websites, and just to distribute within our networks what is happening as at now.
And Carolina might talk about how we've been promoting the SDG Philanthropy Platform more generally as well in Kenya, perhaps.
Yes. So we do advocacy is and campaigns approach to advocacy has been a big part of our work, and we have someone called national coordinators online in those countries where I told you about, where we launched the platform in Africa, in Asia, and Americas. We do have our colleagues working with us, and their role, and they are part of UNDP or UN staff, and their role is to reach out and to connect foundations with processes on the SDGs. So if there is government-led conversation about how to implement SDGs in a country in partnership with business, civil society, then we also encourage foundations and philanthropy, local philanthropy predominantly, but also global foundations, to join these conversations. And we reach out by, like it has been said, we do the mapping and then have direct conversations and reach out and target this new audience for us. We work through local philanthropic associations. So, for example, like through the association like Catherine's, the East Grandmaker networks. We work directly through different collaboratives. We also, the UN agencies have their own relationships with foundations of the government. So we are trying to reach a big swath of foundations, but the key lessons learned is that foundations level of foundation landscape in the countries is very fragmented. The level of their association is fairly low. So while the philanthropic associations have been an important partner, we cannot just necessarily rely on them. We, as the UN, have to have these additional efforts. And for example, in Colombia, it has been extremely visible that we have a very strong foundations network called AFE, and they've done wonderful mappings like MAPA, like what Lauren has been saying, but just for their own national efforts, where over 1,300 projects have been mapped against SDGs. It's a wonderful, unique tool and experience. But these 1,300 projects belong to just above 70 foundations. And in the country, there are 1,000 more foundations. So it really is a huge effort to reach out to this group in this. And what I would like to say is that we have SDG funders. That has been a good tool for us, the website. Now we have set up a second website, which is called SDG Philanthropy, that you can yourself explore. And there we basically map per country a process of what it takes for foundations to engage in local SDG processes in the country. So we have mapped these experiences in Ghana, in Kenya, and in Zambia. And if there is a foundation that is especially coming from abroad and doesn't really understand this, how to navigate this system, then it would be fairly easy. It will be like a quick roadmap for them to understand where are the signposts, or who is who, what are the key policies, and so forth. So, but it's not enough. The physical outreach, the coordinators being out there is what makes or breaks the initiative. So, Lauren, would you like to add anything, Catherine? Otherwise, I'm going to say, Lauren, each of you, please just give us a concluding sentence as the panelists, and then we're going to wind down the webinar for today.
Perfect, great. Thanks, Carolina. So I would just encourage everyone on the call to think about how important the data is in your work and the value of data, and how we need to think about it locally and contextually specifically. And then taking all that into account, let's work together to connect data processes and build the data capacity, skills, and sharing mechanisms to essentially build better data systems and work together more collaboratively for more effective philanthropic work and development outcomes. Arif, do you want to add anything?
Just echoing you, and at the same time, it's just wanted to be aware, tell everyone that it's a long game. So it will take time. We just need to be there, keep our patience, keep our focus, and eventually we'll be there. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lauren and Arif and Catherine. The floor is yours, please. Okay, it looks like maybe we have in the end lost Catherine towards the end, but I would like to then extend great thanks to the panelists. It was a very active presentation, very active discussions. We've received many questions. I repeat that the webinar is recorded. It will be posted on Yammer in UNDP and on SDG Funders, and we all encourage you to contact us and to see how we can replicate these wonderful experiences and the experience of the Foundation Center in your countries. So thank you again, and we invite you for the next webinar, which will take place in June. So watch out and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel, for organizing this. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
you.